When Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli first asked me to play Bond in Live and Let Die, naturally, the first thing I did was read the script. To my horror, I realized that I would have to get myself in a much fitter condition than I normally keep myself. I'm fortunate that I do have a swimming pool at home, which I use at 6 o'clock in the morning, but I realized that was not quite enough. So I spend half an hour in the pool in the morning and half an hour of fairly strenuous exercise. The reason being, in Live and Let Die, I'm required as Bond to do things I've never done before. Fight 1,500 alligators. Be towed behind a boat in a glider. And also drive powerboats. Oh, I've putted around in the Mediterranean in little boats that I've never driven at really high speed, or performed some of the horrendous stunts that I'm expected to do in this. Harry and Cubby got hold of a young man from the southern states of America called Jerry Como. His function on the film is stunt driver, stunt coordinator, and also my teacher.
So the problem was going to be a new Bond, and then it was obviously the biggest part that had not been cast in all of show business. And the favorite was, for a while, Burt Reynolds.
I'd seen a TV show, and I thought the guy was terrific, had all the right elements for Bond.
Cubby had a thing about Bond being over 6 feet. He wanted Bond to be tall. And the second and most important thing was, he said, you can't do Bond and not have him be British. It's absolutely ridiculous. It would be like casting an Englishman in a John Wayne part in a Western. It doesn't work. Cubby said to me, here are several books. Which one would you like to do? I wanted to do Live and Let Die because I thought it had more of an edge to it. Because all the villains were black, and I knew it was a very chancy thing because we were making it in the time of the Black Panthers. We were making it in the time of really a black revolution.
I'm Eddie Smith, the business manager for the Black Stuntmen's Association. We couldn't get into the White Stuntmen's Association, and we had to organize ourselves. Sorry to say it has to be two groups, a white group and a black group, but eventually I think in the near future it will be all just one group. They've been painting white down for many, many years. It's because at that time they had no blacks that were qualified to do stunts. There was a picture called Mad, Mad World, which really gave me the incident, who was directed by Stanley Kramer. He said, Eddie, if you can get me some black guy who gets qualified to do the stunt that I want done in this film, I will use him. He gave me 3 days to produce. So at the end of the 3 days, I really couldn't find a black guy who was qualified. You got to be able to cut the mustard. And when I say about cutting the mustard, it's being yourself qualified and being able to do the job that you were hired to do, whether you're black, white, green, or what. And this is where I thought it was time to get together. In fact, we started our group in 1967, and we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and got ourselves together.
Oh, sure.
So it was just good that Harry Saltzman gave us this opportunity to show what we could do with a stunt.
Hey, everybody back, come on. Back, everybody back. Mind us, fellas, we've got cars as well as boats on this. I would recommend you vacate that area.
Tom knew that I was a jazz buff, and he said, you'd love New Orleans. And I said, oh, come on, Tom, you know, we're not going to do the Mardi Gras because Terence Young has done that with the Junkanoo. What else is in New Orleans? He said, well, there are jazz funerals. In about 5 minutes flat, we conned up that sequence. But I knew that Mr. Broccoli and Mr. Saltzman were not going to send a large unit to New Orleans just to shoot 4 minutes screen time. What else is in New Orleans, Tom? The canals, the levees. Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, we could do a chase. And that's how the New Orleans sequence built up.
There was a wonderful collaborative way that bonds were put together. Guy had ideas. Harry had a million ideas. Cubby had some ideas.
I'd wandered around the Caribbean, found absolutely nothing of any interest.
But then on location scouting, driving by, there suddenly was this sign by the side of the road in huge letters, and it said, "Trespassers will be eaten." And everybody stopped, and it was this crocodile farm. The name of the fellow who ran the crocodile farm was Ross Kananga.
This absolutely marvelous man, a complete lunatic.
These prehistoric monsters, there are about 2,000 of them around here. They're very odd things. They live to 200 years old, so they're not going anywhere, and that's why you always see them not moving, but they can really shift. And the only piece of information, useless, I might add, that I can tell you is if they come at you, zigzag, because they can't zigzag. But they do move fast, so that's why you've got to be a little bit careful around here. There's a nice one over here, Roger. I'd like you to look at that. That's a croc. That's a croc, because it's got the pointed nose. You can come round, and there's another one moving there. See him over there. The pointed nose. They don't move. They stay with their mouths open like that for a very long time, doing absolutely nothing. You've got one there for you. He looks absolutely stuffed, but believe me, if you start moving, he really starts happening.
How old is he?
He's about 5, 6 years old. All there, too, floating. That's the sort of shot that we like. Get you and them together.
I did say to Sean, it's got crocodiles, it's got a boat chase, it's got, and I was trying to kind of just see if I could tweak his interest. And he said to me, there's only two things I've ever wanted to own in my life, a golf course and my own bank. He said, and I have the golf course, and I'm well on the way to the bank. I'm not coming back.
I'd met Cubby and Harry because we used to gamble and went to the Curzon House Club. And so I would sit across from the table with these two big spenders. And eventually, we became friends. And then one day, Harry called me and he said, well, Cubby and I would like you to do the next one.
They came up with Roger Moore. Seemed like a good idea. He's attractive. He was debonair.
Sean's personality comes through very strongly in all the Bonds he made. My personality is entirely different. So I sort of read a couple of books, and one of them it said that Bond had returned from a mission somewhere. He had killed, but he didn't like killing.
Sean could sit at a table with a beautiful girl, and you had the option as a writer of either having him lean over and kiss her or stick a knife in her. Roger could kiss the girl, but if he stuck the knife in her, he would look nasty.
So that was the way I played it. Somebody really didn't like doing it.
But when we're in trouble, which is fairly frequently, we always go back to Fleming himself and the very great characters that he produced, particularly amongst the women. Pussy Galore, Solitaire, and the unique proposition that he gave Solitaire, a girl who could foretell the future. Here, Solitaire deals with tarot cards and the occult. And you will see on the screen that it works, because when she turns a card over and says such and such will happen, it happens. This is Bond's major problem.
Black Queen on the Red King. Miss.
Solitaire.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
I know who you are, what you are, and why you've come. You've made a mistake. You will not succeed.
It isn't until he realizes that this girl has the power of foretelling the future that he can make any progress with the story at all.
Right.
My only regret is I won't be there to see it.
You got the feeling of the English gentleman more out of Roger than you got out of Sean.
On the other hand, Roger, and that's why the humor maybe increased in Live and Let Die, could play a quip very well. Roger knew his way around a sophisticated comedy scene very well. So you could do things with Roger, right? You wrote for Roger differently.
He was filling some pretty big shoes.
The only thing that worried me was how could I say, my name is Bond, James Bond, without saying, my name is Bond, James Bond. That was the one thing I had a couple of nightmares about.
I remember him saying about the logo that was still obviously Sean Connery's image. He says, when are we going to change the logos there?
We tried in various ways not to imitate Sean where we didn't have to.
Guy said, I think we should avoid any direct comparisons by you not saying the things that Sean said.
The first issue was that they were making sure that he never raised his eyebrow as he had done in The Saint, because that was like a famous mannerism of his.
I mean, we've all done the Bond pictures. We all know each other. And for a newcomer to come in, it's a very daunting experience.
Guy Hamilton, I think, was more worried about me taking over Bond than I was.
And Roger took it very well indeed.
Until we almost started shooting, it just said, scene 156, the most terrific boat chase you've ever seen, because I never got around to writing it until Harry and David Picker and other people said, where's this terrific boat chase?
Of course, when we got there was a slight problem because all the bayous now were kind of heavily overgrown with reeds and you couldn't really see them. We whistled up a helicopter and we started flying around.
We got to the beautiful house that's in the boat chase where there's a wedding on the little point and the boats go across the point. And we both said, oh, this is great.
I remember we landed in this kind of backyard, as you call them in America, and a lady came out.
They decided that the point on which we lived was just right for a boat to leap across. And the first we realized was when a helicopter landed on our front lawn, to the great delight of the children.
She said, boys, boys, boys. We could see children in the background looking, you see, and she said, may I help you? So I said, yeah, we're, scouting for James Bond.
The director came and asked if we would mind if they used our property. Of course, we were thrilled to death. It sounded like the most exciting thing that's happened on the bayou in a long time.
I'd never ever seen Southern hospitality. These people were just amazing. They'd spoken to some people called the Stingers. I think they were in the Everglades somewhere. One of those places, and these boats kind of went up a 45-degree ramp, and kind of jumped about 4 feet, something like that. But we had to do a jump of at least about 80, 85 feet.
And we've had a number of problems, let's say, in getting boats to go as far as we had to go.
We found that Jerry, when he actually hit the ramp, he'd got to put the motor in tilt, just at that moment when it hit. We did hold the world record for boat jumps, and I think that particular day, Jerry jumped 115 feet.
And the whole thing, one take, and that's it. But all the hard work been done pre-production.
On the second jump, which is definitely a slower boat, and it's one of the baddie boats, we came over the cars and we landed in the water, but we had difficulty because they had the boat that Bond was in going on, which created a wake, and that wake, while my boat landed on it, carried it off into another direction, and of course we turned over and ended up off in the weeds.
We did have 1 or 2 accidents during the preparation.
The problem with jet boats is that if your engine should cut for some unknown reason, you can't steer the boat. We came around a bend, and the boat was on its sort of tilted at an angle, and obviously the gas tank wasn't full. And so the engine cut up, and I got hit, bang, and I flew into the back of the boat. And I came out of that with what I thought was losing my teeth, and with a leg that wouldn't move. This was the day before we started shooting, when we were rehearsing.
I originally wanted Diana Ross. I thought it would be, and I thought it would be in a very positive way, barrier breaking.
I was doing a series called The Aeneid Line, and my agent, John Redway, called me and said they wanted to meet me for the Bond film. I remember when I came in, Harry said, take off your coat. So I took off my coat, take off your hat. He sort of barked, and I took off this fur hat, and of course down came all my hair tumbling down. And that was it. He said, we want you to play the lead in the James Bond film. And I went, what? And I said, well, I'm doing the Aeneid Line. And he said, never mind. He said, I want you to come and meet my partner.
I believe in that. I believe that there is an inner part of man, self, that is undistinguishable, that's powerful, that's part of the universe, that can almost make a person so in tune with the nature of things around him, both past, present, and future, that clairvoyancy is more than just possible. It was one of the things that attracted me to play the part of Kananga, the fact that he desperately believes in in his clairvoyance in terms of using solitaire to find out everything that Bond does in the picture, and it confuses him, you know. Every move that Bond makes, Kananga is on top of him because he's got solitaire. And that's the thing that attracted me to the part, in playing it with Kananga. In doing a Bond film, you get the chance to experience all those things you don't do in ordinary life.
I was on the street doing Across 110th Street. And David Picker, I believe he was then vice president of the United Artists, came up to me in the street and said, "What are you doing directly after you do the film?" So I said, "Probably going home." He says, "I wouldn't count on it. I think you better get ready to go to England for a Live and Let Die."
So I'm sitting there, and Harry Saltzman says, he looks at me. We exchange some conversation. All I can remember is maybe a couple of minutes went by, and then he said, "Madam, how soon can you get on a plane to go to New Orleans?" I said, as an actor always says, anytime. You never refuse. He says, "Well, we'll have you in a plane in about 2 hours."
I got a call to go to a hotel, I think was the Algonquin in New York City, I'm not quite sure. And who do I meet but Guy Hamilton? And he said to me, "What kind of weapon would you like to have?" I knew right then and there I had it. And I'd say, "Well, you know, you've used so many guns and many knives. Give me something unusual like a hook."
It's a Bond movie, so you know Bond is going to win. If the villain is black, you know he's going to lose because the villain is going to lose. So along the way, I thought, maybe we can have some other people to make fun of.
That kind of dialogue you can't miss, you know. The best dialogue writer I've ever seen.
Now, Clifton James, who came from New York and doesn't remotely have a Southern accent, came down and he had a wonderful gut, you know.
I wore padding. I wore an umpire suit because they're all very proud of their stomachs, you know.
This end is very safe. We have tested it. It is sometimes interesting, and I think you might enjoy that, what happens down that end.
First stuntman got into the boat and he's kind of zooming around. And suddenly there's a most enormous crash.
The guy crashed into this tree. They called in the paramedics.
Oh, great. Great.
I'm okay. I'm okay. Set me down. Okay.
So now we're now going to try and do the stunt again. And action. Up comes the boat. Straight over, right through the wedding. And I said, I bet it's going to hit that tree. Hit it fair and square, I can't tell you. Tore another big hole in the side.
Oh, and all the practice runs, the boat's always going off to the left. I hit that tree just dead center. I mean, the boat went absolutely perfectly straight all the way across that lawn, which it never has done before.
Everybody's now very worried, and Guy Hamilton said, don't think we should do any more, you know. Not today. We'll try tomorrow. The bayou's flooded. Everything's underwater. But all the chairs are floating.
There was a cold wind blowing, and I could feel this ache, and I went into my Winnebago, and I lay down. My knees came up to my chin. And Derek Cracknell, the first assistant, came in and said, "Rog, when you go," he said, "I better call a doctor."
Oh, it was very exotic. It was absolutely amazing. I've never seen anywhere so beautiful in my whole life as this hotel called the Sans-Souci.
It was wonderful. I spent every morning swimming in that pool.
Well, I must say it's fantastic to be in Jamaica in the winter. Sun when it's cold and foggy in London. And to be playing a part in a James Bond film, which demands all that action, is something I'm not used to at all.
And the service. We had housekeepers, cooks, and maids who would knock on your door and say, "Madam, what would you like to have for breakfast this morning?"
And I just remember the music and the warmth and the beautiful beaches. It was just so exotic and glorious.
Mr. Moore, I'm about to start what is known as a psychic reading for you. Is that okay, sir?
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
I hope it is afterwards. Tarot cards were being turned over and said that I was going to have a son.
You're going to have a son, sir. There's going to be a son in your life.
Well, apparently, He was conceived there. So I don't know whether the witch doctor had anything to do with it.
And I think you were born to be what is termed a humanitarian. You will become one of our great Buddha.
Finally, I found something in life that's a little more important than thinking of yourself. Not a little more important, a lot more important.
We bought a London bus, very, very cheap.
We actually took a bus driver who was one of the principal instructors at London Passenger Transport.
And they said, well, what we actually wanted to do is to skid a bus round on a 30-foot road.
You feel that the first time you're doing that it's going to tip over, but they don't tip over.
And I, of course, was involved in some of the stunts myself, which in retrospect was kind of foolish. I was in that bus when it spun around and, you know, it could have been anyone.
Well, we had to put a ramp into the, on the kind of the parapet into the sea. I remember we had to move all this coral, and of course it went slightly awry, and of course the poor fellow landed into the coral that we hadn't cleared because he hadn't hit the right spot. We only did it once, so it wasn't a question of redoing it.
Oh, I got a bit sceptical about that one because I've never actually seen a bus go under a bridge and take the roof completely off. It generally stops halfway.
I said, you know, have they done this before? And they said no.
When it all set up, we went up about 300 or 400 yards up the road.
And I said, well, how do they know it's going to work? And they said they don't.
And they told me roughly what speed it would take, about 40 miles an hour.
And I remember my heart was pumping.
And they just said action, and away we went.
And then, of course, I felt very proud to have been in that bus.
Ross Kananga, from what I understand, was a Seminole Indian.
His father was put on an alligator show, croc show, and Ross, as a kid, used to put his head in the mouth of the alligator, and one day the junk, and he was in there for 20 minutes before the croc relaxed and let him out.
And he had seen his father be eaten alive by crocodiles.
Ross knew which ones, so that one got my dad.
And decided to take over the family business.
They had 1,500 of these creatures.
Ross Kananga at one time had a lion, pet lion that used to patrol the place. And they got to the lion.
These things are really lethal, alligators and crocodiles.
And then they stuck me on this island, little tiny island.
This was a major production number because all the crocs had to be taken out.
And I was stuck on there while Teehee throws out bits of chicken to attract the alligators.
They were shooting the sequence, and this mechanical arm is very hard to work.
I'm messing with this hook, trying to get it to work right. And I dropped a couple of pieces on the side there.
I thought it was a rather smart idea when we were doing wardrobe before we started the film. I said, well, why don't I have crocodile shoes?
Do you think this is a good idea, Guy? I think it's a beautiful idea.
Once they see some white flesh and they're swimming, they can leap 20, 30 feet.
Everyone went crazy.
What a mistake. I had the skin of one of their cousins. They were out to get me.
So I had just been told this story, and now I come in to do a scene with a snake. The man who was holding the snake in my sequence was a dancer, and he wasn't real happy about holding the real snake either. But by the second or third day, you know, he was feeling a little more comfortable, and between takes, he put the snake in the other hand. Of course, the snake turned around and bit him. Well, this guy screamed, dropped the snake, went running out of the place. Everyone went running after him to make sure that he was okay because he'd been bitten by the snake, and the snake was coming straight for me. And I'm tied up at the stake. Nobody cares about me, but this snake's coming right for me. I was terrified. And at the last second, the snake handler picked up the snake when it can only have been inches from my feet, and I really thought this was it.
We have been on the same vibration all day long. All right? That's right. If you fall, get up. I couldn't care less. All right? That's what we're here for. 5, 6, ready, go. And run 10, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You all look like Swan Queen stick. Rest. Woo.
I had a very special rapport with Jeffrey Holder.
Really nice guy. big, enormous, with a quite understandable fear of snakes.
Jeffrey had to do the thing where he falls backwards into the snakes.
And Guy knew that he wasn't going to do this.
And I saw the real coffin with the real snakes. I've never seen so many snakes in my life. It was really scary.
But we were very fortunate that Princess Alexandra came to visit the set that day.
They knew that Jeffrey, being such a gentleman and such a consummate professional, would not refuse to do that scene if the royal family were watching him.
And so when they said turnover action, he went backwards. He didn't stay there long, but he went backwards.